What if the walls meant to contain justice became an instrument of unimaginable suffering? In the darkest corners of the world exist prisons so notorious that surviving them becomes a battle. The inmates face brutal environments that seem to break their spirit, from overcrowding to severe violence and inhumane conditions that define life behind bars. These 10 prisons aren't just the worst. They are nightmares where every day is a battle to stay alive and hold on to a shred of humanity. So grab your flashlight and let's delve into the dark corridors of these 10 worst women's prisons in the world. Number 10. Pattare Prison Estonia. In between the coastline of Tallinn, Estonia, lies Pattare Prison, a place that looks like it came out of a frightening horror movie. While it once served as a military base, it later became known as one of the worst prisons for female inmates in the world. Pattare Prison was originally built in the 19th century as a sea fortress to protect Tallinn from naval attacks. However, by the time it became a prison in the 1920s, it began to accumulate a sinister reputation. The construction, with its thick stone walls and barred windows, was designed to intimidate. And yes, intimidate it did. But not just for the prisoners, even visitors felt a frightening chill as soon as they stepped inside. Pattare became notorious for its treatment of female inmates, many of whom were political prisoners during the Soviet era. Now imagine you're in a place where the cold isn't just outside, but lingers down into your soul with little more than a straw mattress for comfort. A former prisoner recalled how frost would form on the walls of the cells during winter, forcing women to cuddle together for warmth. Most times, the women were left with no option but to share thin blankets that offered no real protection from the cold. She said, "It felt like the cold was in your bones, and there was no way to escape it." As a result of this, inmates frequently fell ill, with hypothermia and respiratory infections being common due to the lack of proper heating in an overcrowded area. As it is well known, Pattare was notorious for its extreme overcrowding. It wasn't just a problem, but a prison slogan. Initially designed to hold around 1,200 inmates, it often housed over 4,200 individuals at its peak. Inmates constantly shared cramped quarters, sometimes up to 40 individuals in a space meant for far fewer, which led to poor living conditions. As if the prison's history weren't chilling enough, many believe it is haunted by the spirits of those who suffered within its walls. Visitors often report strange occurrences, cold drafts in empty rooms, whispers echoing down long hallways, and an overwhelming sense of sorrow that seems to cling to every stone. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, it's hard to deny that Pattare has an atmosphere thick with unspoken stories. Number 9. Julia Tutwiler Prison, Alabama, USA. Behind the towering fences of Julia Tutwiler Prison is a reality few dare to imagine. This isn't just a prison, but a place of unexplainable suffering for decades. Located in Wetumpka, Alabama, Julia Tutwiler Prison was opened in 1942. It was named after Julia Tutwiler, a reformer who advocated for better living conditions in prisons. Ironically, this same prison that bears her name has become a subject of abuse and neglect, making it one of the worst female prisons in the United States. From the get-go, Tutwiler was originally planned to accommodate approximately 550 prisoners, but it has frequently surpassed that capacity, occasionally housing close to 1,000 individuals. The overcrowding has resulted in critical situations, with basic human rights being regularly abused. In 2013, Tutwiler was listed by Mother Jones as one of the top 10 worst prisons in America, specifically due to widespread sexual abuse and insufficient medical attention. It's almost as if they forgot to read the memo about treating inmates like human beings. As if that was not enough, the Equal Justice Initiative found disturbing proof of sexual violence occurring inside its premises, like a twisted game of who can break the rules first. Interrogations with more than 50 prisoners uncovered a disturbing trend of officer-on-inmate attacks, including cases where female inmates conceived as a result of being raped by guards. The EJI's discoveries resulted in a filed complaint to the United States Department of Justice, which later verified that Alabama was violating the 8th Amendment by not safeguarding inmates from sexual abuse. It's safe to say that this is not the kind of attention any establishment wants. Now imagine starting each day in a location where there is no assurance of your safety. Women here experience consequences for speaking up about abuse, such as being isolated or retaliated against by guards. One prisoner described how her locker box, which held precious letters and photos from her children, was taken away unjustly, making her feel like her essence had been taken from her. With the prison's old and neglected infrastructure, inmates frequently experience substandard health care. This case was reported about a woman who nearly died due to mismanagement of her health condition before receiving emergency treatment outside the prison. Talk about a plot twist nobody wanted. The lack of mental health support only adds to the chaos, creating an environment where despair thrives like weeds in an abandoned garden. Despite numerous reports highlighting these abuses, meaningful reforms have been slower than molasses. In January 2016, Alabama Governor Robert Bentley announced plans to close Tutwiler as part of a broader prison reform initiative, but it was like promising to clean your room, but never actually picked up a single sock. However, as of 2020, the prison remains open and its legacy of suffering intact. The stories emerging from Tutwiler reveal not just statistics, but the profound human cost of incarceration in such an environment. Women who enter this prison, often already traumatized by their pasts, such as victims of abuse, find their spirits further crushed by the harsh realities of prison life. One former inmate poignantly described how she felt her spirit shattered during her time there. She had entered with hope, but left feeling hollow. Most times, pregnant women face particularly grim circumstances at Tutwiler. With no facilities for infants, mothers must give birth only to say goodbye immediately afterward. To this day, the stories within the walls of Julia Tutwiler Prison serve as both a cautionary tale and a rallying cry for justice. Number 8. Tadmore Prison, Syria. The mere mention of Tadmore Prison, situated in the dry vastness of the Syrian desert, close to Palmyra, conjures feelings of fear and hopelessness. Frequently labeled as hell on earth, it has acquired notoriety for its harsh handling of prisoners, especially females. Imagine a location where the atmosphere is heavy with the burden of pain, where optimism is merely a faint recollection, and where the sounds of distress bounce off chilling, dim passageways. Initially built as a military base under French rule, Tadmore later became a well-known jail used for holding political rebels. During the 1980s, under the rule of Hafez al-Assad, it was seen as a representation of tyranny and ruthlessness. If you're looking for a place that specializes in breaking spirits rather than rehabilitating individuals, congratulations, you found it. The guards often say, "We are God. Your life and death are under our control." This frightening phrase encapsulated the prevailing doctrine not only within the confines of Tadmore Prison in Palmyra, but more broadly across Syrian penitentiaries, especially when it came to political detainees. Amnesty International said it was characterized by suffering, with torture and humiliation happening daily. If you believe your worst workday was terrible, imagine experiencing it in a location where simply being there is a type of penalty. On June 27, 1980, Tadmore witnessed one of its most notorious events, a massacre in which approximately 600 to 1,000 prisoners were brutally killed after a failed assassination of President Assad. This harsh deed was not only a single occurrence, but a part of a wider trend of violence allowed by the state that defined everyday life in Tadmore. The circumstances in Tadmore are extremely grim and depressing. Imagine yourself locked in a place where fundamental human rights are absent. No family visits, no access to books, no way to interact with the outside world. Prisoners endure constant psychological torment and physical abuse. Torture techniques often involve brutal beatings using sticks and cables, electric shocks causing permanent scars, and degrading acts like being compelled to swallow dead animals. One former inmate recounted her experience. She said, "A knock on the cell door often meant one thing, which is another prisoner has died. The courtyard, which should have offered a breath of fresh air, instead became a stage for arbitrary executions. The guards would call prisoners out for breathers, only to subject them to brutal beatings or worse. In this environment, survival becomes an act of defiance against despair. Female detainees are often locked away in solitary confinement, or paired with another woman in conditions that resemble a nightmare more than reality. They endure savage beatings and sexual assaults with the added humiliation of being forced to confess to crimes they did not commit. Despite the oppressive silence enforced by the regime, stories from Tadmore have begun to emerge. Testimonies that detail the horrors faced by inmates. Memoirs written by former prisoners have surfaced online, circumventing state censorship and shedding light on their experiences. These accounts serve not only as personal catharsis, but also as powerful indictments against a regime that thrives on fear. Number 7. Kwang Central Prison, Thailand. What if your first day behind bars involved being shackled with heavy iron chains? That's the reality for anyone entering Kwang Prison, also known as the Bangkok Hilton. But don't be fooled by the nickname. This is no luxurious hotel. This prison that houses many foreign inmates is a harsh prison that handles death row and long-sentence prisoners. From the moment prisoners arrive, they're greeted not with basic comforts, but with a set of shackles locked around their ankles for the first 3 months of their stay. While death row inmates were required to have their leg irons permanently welded on. Yes, you heard that right. These shackles aren't just for show. They're a reminder that freedom is a distant memory, and your new life inside Kwang will test you in ways you never thought possible. Constructed between 1927 and 1931, Kwang was initially envisioned by King Rama V as a jail for the worst offenders. It was established to hold those awaiting execution or serving long sentences. But over the years, it has been transformed into a place that could make even seasoned criminals reconsider their life choices. The prison houses around 6,000 inmates, many of whom are foreigners, caught in the web of Thailand's strict drug laws. The condition of these prisoners is so dire that many of them lose either their sanity or their lives. Food is scarce, and what is provided often resembles something you'd find at the bottom of a dumpster rather than a meal. The infamous chit system means that only the wealthiest prisoners can afford decent food, while others are left to subsist on one bowl of rice and vegetables, if they're lucky. Imagine trying to negotiate with your fellow inmates for a few extra bites like it's a high-stakes poker game. Do you think you've heard it all? Wait, there's more. Kwang isn't just about bad food and poor living conditions, it is also known for its notorious and brutal treatment of inmates. Although human rights organizations have raised alarms about torture and abuse within its walls, reports of beatings and psychological torment never stop, making you wonder if this prison was designed by someone who had watched too many horror films. Inmates have described being subjected to physical violence for minor infractions, like not folding their sheets correctly or accidentally looking at a guard the wrong way. It's like being in a twisted version of boot camp where the drill sergeant has lost all sense of proportion. Women in Kwang have reported feeling isolated and powerless, often without recourse to address grievances about their treatment. In this environment, camaraderie among inmates becomes essential for survival, but it can also lead to conflicts as they navigate the harsh realities of prison life. The harsh treatment of inmates in Bangkok's prisons, particularly the overcrowded conditions and lack of basic necessities, inspired the 1989 miniseries Bangkok Hilton, which dramatizes the struggles of a woman imprisoned for drug trafficking and highlights the grim realities faced by female inmates in such facilities. However, in recent years there have been efforts to improve conditions at Kwang. In 2013, officials abolished the use of shackles for most inmates, a small victory celebrated like winning an Oscar in this grim setting. However, many high-profile inmates remain shackled, leaving advocates wondering if real change will ever take root. Despite its notorious reputation, Kwang has also become somewhat of a cultural phenomenon in Thailand. It has been featured in numerous documentaries and articles highlighting its grim reality. For some reason, people seem fascinated by places that embody human suffering. Perhaps it's our morbid curiosity at play. Number 6. Antananarivo Prison, Madagascar. Nestled in the heart of the capital, Antananarivo, this prison is a stark reminder that life behind bars doesn't come with the luxury of the island's natural beauty. For the women incarcerated here, Antananarivo is an under-resourced institution where survival is both a physical and psychological challenge. It is recorded as one of the most crowded and dirtiest women's prisons in the world. Here, the inmates sleep so tightly that many of them have to lay their feet on one's heads. With a space designed to house 800 inmates, it has been reported to house over 4,000 detainees. This situation is exacerbated by a significant number of pre-trial detainees, who make up about 60% of the prison population, often held for extended periods without trial. Like the case of Demoina, a 33-year-old lady who was sent to Antananarivo prison to be held in pre-trial detention on charges of corruption of minors. On the 10th of March, she was arrested on suspicion of having a same-gender relationship with her 19-year-old girlfriend, Fee. This followed a tip-off to the police by Fee's mother. In Madagascar, the penal code severely punishes anyone who has committed an indecent or unnatural act with an individual of the same gender, under the age of 21 years. Demoina, who was supposed to be released from prison immediately and unconditionally, spent 10 more months behind bars. This and many more practices became characterized by inadequate sanitation and nutrition. Additionally, it has been reported that prisoners receive just one meal daily, usually made up of boiled cassava, leading to a high prevalence of malnutrition. Research also discovered that around 38.4% of women inmates are malnourished, experiencing chronic undernourishment because of inadequate food quality and quantity. The poor hygiene conditions have caused a rise in sickness levels for inmates who have restricted availability of medical care. Also, the blend of overcrowding and poor hygiene creates a perfect setting for the transmission of infectious diseases, leading to worries about outbreaks in times of health emergencies such as the COVID-19 pandemic. Acknowledging these problems, there have been demands for changes in Madagascar's penal system. In the year 2019, President Andry Rajoelina went to Antananarivo prison and recognized the poor conditions. His administration has subsequently suggested actions to alleviate overcrowding in prisons and enhance living conditions for prisoners. Efforts involve raising the prison budget to improve food quality and hygiene standards. Furthermore, global entities such as Amnesty International have pushed for a decrease in rates of pre-trial detention and enhancements in general prison conditions. It is stressed that pre-trial detention should not be a common practice, but rather a rare occurrence, as it plays a big role in causing overcrowding and violating human rights. Subscribers pick. In a hidden world, away from protests and debates, the silent battle of female prisoners unfolds. Standing in poorly lit hallways, they wait with empty gazes, their faces showing signs of both frustration and weariness. The impact of not having even the most fundamental human rights can be seen in every facial expression. These females, dressed in worn-out outfits, are more than just statistics in a system. They are unique individuals, each with a tale, each confronting an ongoing struggle against dehumanizing forces. They remind us that, no matter their crime, every person deserves to be treated with dignity. The fight for their human rights must continue, even behind prison walls. But what would you do if your basic rights were stripped away and your humanity was called into question? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Number 5. Al-Qanatir Prison, Egypt. Behind those iron bars of Al-Qanatir Prison lies a world of forgotten women, their stories buried beneath layers of concrete, whispers, and despair. This prison, located in Qanatir El Khayriya, on the outskirts of Cairo, Egypt, is the largest women's prison in the country and serves as a poignant example of the challenges faced by women in the penal system. Established in the early 90s, this facility has a complex history and has been the subject of various human rights reports highlighting its harsh conditions. The women complained about overcrowding within the cells and poor ventilation. The facilities were initially designed for 500 bodies, but at the time of the interviews held about 100 women prisoners with limited access to fresh air or sunlight, turning the living space into a nightmare. These cells are cramped, poorly ventilated, and lack basic sanitary facilities, rendering the ventilation system almost useless. Prisoners at Al-Qanatir often face severe conditions as they must share washrooms that are not accessible at all times. Instead of proper toilets, they are forced to use buckets for their needs, shared among groups of about 100 women, making the stench from the cell unbearable. This lack of hygiene contributes to health issues and reflects broader systemic neglect within Egypt's prison system. But it's the issue of menstrual hygiene that adds another layer of difficulty and hardship. Sanitary products are almost nowhere to be found, and when you're without them, you're left improvising. Using clothes, tissues, whatever can be found, making every breath an unpleasant smell. It's humiliating, especially when resources run out and there's nothing you can do but wait. But that's not all. Life in Al-Qanatir is marked by routine and restriction, as inmates are allowed family visits only every 15 days, each lasting a mere 10 to 15 minutes. This limited contact sometimes leads to feelings of isolation and despair among the women, many of whom have children outside who depend on them emotionally and financially. The prison's administration offers little in terms of rehabilitation or education programs. Instead, the focus remains on containment rather than reform. Women are often left to navigate their incarceration without support or guidance from anyone, which can cause mental health issues. Human rights organizations have documented these conditions extensively. In 1992, Middle East Watch compiled testimonies from women who described their experiences in Qanatir as traumatic and dehumanizing. The lack of adequate food and healthcare has led to chronic malnutrition among inmates, further complicating their already precarious situation. But Al-Qanatir is not the worst we can think of. More horrifying prisons are yet to be discussed. Stay tuned, as you won't want to miss the next terrifying female prison on our list. Number 4. Karchak Prison, Iran. What would you have done if the very air you breathed felt like a challenge? Well, this is the situation of inmates of Karchak Prison, a place where endurance isn't just tested, it's pushed to its absolute limits. Located in the harsh desert southeast of Tehran, Karchak wasn't even established for people. Rather, it was originally an industrial livestock facility. One would think, since it is the only all-women prison in Iran, they would treat the women right, but the opposite is the case. The prison holds over 1,000 women in conditions that make you question how much a person can endure. Imagine sharing a space so cramped that personal boundaries don't just blur, they vanish completely. Designed for 700 inmates, it currently houses more than 1,700 inmates. That's like double the estimated capacity of the prison. Health was another primary concern, as inmates working in the kitchen and the boiler room had no access to burn medication. They said while psychotherapists at the prison clinic prescribe both sedatives and tranquilizers with abandon. IV drips are also hard to come by, and lab test results invariably come back late, even for those with cancer. One of the inmates recalled, "The situation in the clinic is a disgrace. They inject an inmate on the same bed where earlier they put stitches on another with self-inflicted injuries and whose blood has covered the bed. Most of them are malnourished, with the prison charging more than 3 times the market price for fresh fruit. They bring fruits once a month, and 90% of fruits aren't allowed. The heat is relentless, the kind that sticks to your skin and seeps into your bones, and the water that comes out of the taps is more of a gamble than a guarantee. Some days it's undrinkable, forcing the women to rely on whatever bottled water they can scrounge up. It's either the prison water is salty, muddy, or sometimes there's no drinking water at all. Those who can afford it buy mineral water at 4,000 tomans, which is $1 per bottle. Pregnant women and mothers, and the children on the mother's ward, don't get nutritious food to eat or safe water to drink. Showers are rare luxuries, with lines that stretch long enough to make you think twice about whether it's even worth the wait. And when you do get your turn, the water is cold, barely more than a drizzle, and gone before you can feel remotely clean. As if that was not enough. The majority of Karchak prison inmates are always hungry. They hand out 80 people's food to wards holding more than 120. They were served no sign of meat unless an inspector from the prison's organization was visiting. On the pretext of coronavirus, Sogra Kodadadi, the chief warden, even banned charities from bringing inadequate food. Talk about wickedness at its peak. Life in Karchak is like being stuck in a never-ending nightmare. The desert heat, the overcrowding, the inhumane conditions, it's a world far removed from reality. You might think it doesn't get worse, but the truth is it does. Wait till you find a prison that houses a serial killer and an underaged. Number 3. Indiana Women's Prison. Have you ever thought of what life is like inside a women's prison? Indiana Women's Prison was established way back in 1873. It all started with a group of reformers who recognized that women were facing harsh conditions inside the male prisons. Imagine being locked up alongside men. Many believed it was not only unsafe, but also unfair. Thanks to the efforts of advocates like Rhoda Coffin and Sarah Smith, Indiana opened its first dedicated facility for women. The very first woman to enter the prison was Sally Hubbard, convicted of multiple murders. Talk about beginning with a big impact. However, in Indiana, 4 women have been sentenced to death since 1900, but none of them were actually executed. One of the most well-known cases includes Paula Cooper, a 15-year-old girl who was sentenced to death as a juvenile for her role in a murder. Her case drew international attention and led to significant discussions about juvenile justice reform and even intervention from Pope John Paul II. Raising the age of execution from 10 to 16 years and implementing laws to prohibit jail employees from engaging in sexual relationships with inmates. This came about after guards and a therapist were charged with having sex with Cooper. Another notable inmate is Sarah Jo Pender, known for her escape from Rockville Correctional Facility. Her story highlights not only issues within the prison system, but also raises questions about mental health support for incarcerated women. The prison was first situated close to downtown Indianapolis, but later relocated to its present location on Girls School Road. From the beginning, the goal was to rehabilitate rather than just punish. Inmates engaged in activities like sewing and laundry, learning skills that would help them change their ways when they got out. Conditions at the women's prison came into question in the summer 2020, as prisoners and family members complained about inhumane conditions imposed to reduce the spread of the novel coronavirus. About half of the prison's 650 inmates were housed in freestanding cottages without air conditioning, running water, or toilets. Inmates also were restricted to their cells 18 to 20 hours a day. The prison opened doors to allow increased air circulation and reduced restrictions in response, but it remained unclear whether the problems had been resolved. Number 2. Bohol Prison, Turkey. Bohol Prison is among Turkey's numerous correctional institutions that accommodate female prisoners, including individuals found guilty of severe offenses and dissenters with political beliefs. The prison frequently receives criticism for being overcrowded and having subpar living conditions. Picture squeezing into a tight area with many other women, where having personal space is rare and privacy is absent. It feels like being trapped in an endless team assignment where nobody is willing to complete their share. Originally created to accommodate a specific number of prisoners, Bohol frequently surpasses its limit, resulting in overcrowded living spaces that can accommodate 3 times the original intended population. Prisoners often complain about having to share cramped cells with several other women, which makes it challenging to find a moment of privacy. The absence of essential services, like adequate sanitation facilities, makes the critical situation even worse. As if that was not enough, reports coming from Bohol Prison regarding abuse also became alarming. Prisoners have shared stories of physical abuse from officers, such as getting assaulted for small offenses or just for not following commands fast enough. Many women are hesitant to report abuse because they are afraid of facing retaliation for their actions. There is also a shortage of resources for mental health services. Women who come to Bohol often bring with them the burdens of previous traumas, only to discover that they receive minimal assistance in the environment. The lack of sufficient mental health care can result in worsening conditions for individuals who are already at risk. Number 1. Heilongjiang Prison. In the remote northeast of China lies Heilongjiang Women's Prison, nicknamed the Cemetery of Falun Gong Ladies, a place where the walls not only confine bodies, but silent stories of struggle and resilience. Here, hope flickers like a candle in the wind, overshadowed by harsh conditions and a strict regime. The prison is notorious for its oppressive atmosphere, where inmates endure a relentless discipline that prioritizes control over rehabilitation. It is also known for its brutal treatment of female inmates, particularly those practicing Falun Gong. These inmates are subjected to forced labor, sleep deprivation, and physical abuse. For instance, Liu Jinping described being forced to sit on a small stool for hours, leading to painful sores. She was denied restroom access and constantly monitored by other inmates. Another notable example was the case of Wang Chunyan, She was sentenced for her beliefs, endured similar abuses, including being forced to watch propaganda videos while being isolated from others. These practitioners are kept isolated from one another to prevent sharing information about their experiences. They often endure beatings and verbal abuse for refusing to renounce their beliefs. Despite international outcry and advocacy for reform, the prison continues its oppressive practices, raising concerns about the broader implications for human rights in China. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video.